Welcome to Three, a part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gill Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. And Novak Djokovic has won number 24 at the U.S. Open. We have missed you guys. U.S. Open, a busy time for the three of us. So we are catching up for the first time since before it all began, when Novak was 7 wins away from his 24th major title, his 4th U.S. Open. And as a result, we have a lot to get into. Of course, the straight set win over Medvedev in the final, first and foremost. We'll also probably talk quite a bit about the semifinals as well towards the end. But let's talk about the significance of the win. I think for most of Djokovic's major finals recently, there's been something really, really big. Just because of the slam tally and the case of Wimbledon, the Grand Slam, and maybe a little bit of like Alcaraz subplot. This almost felt more normal, like a regular major final where he was just kind of playing to win another slam. But I think the main significance was the fact that it kind of felt overdue at the U.S. Open, Amy.
He returned to New York where he wasn't able to play for a while. So that was big. He wasn't even able to enter the country. So that had some significance to it. But I think even more than that, for me, he's 36 years old and he had one of his best years ever. He won 3 Grand Slams. And the way that he beat Medvedev at age 36, for me, it was incredibly straightforward, incredibly disciplined, and that was the significance for me.
I like that about the discipline. You can almost see that in the way the match point went. It's like he had kind of a business as usual demeanor to him, even though there'd been a lot of physicality, particularly in the second set. In the big picture, I looked, of course, at my longevity people, and you look at people, Pancho Gonzalez, Ken Rosewall, Jimmy Connors, they were all epic career guys, but they had moments. They didn't win 3 majors turning 36. I mean, 3 and get to the finals of all 4. Thank you very much. And lose the Wimbledon final 6-4 in the 5th set. I mean, that's just, I don't know, of Novak's years, one day we should stack up his 3 slam years and think about which is really the most impressive, because this might be it.
Yeah. I mean, compared to what? It's 2011, 2015, and now 2023, I believe, are the 3.
21. Well, 21.
Oh, and 21. I forgot 21.
And short, the one short. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, unbelievable. I think obviously the majors have become more of a focus. So it wasn't a 2015 like year where he was winning tons of Masters and such. But in the context of him being 36, obviously you have to kind of look at that as maybe the most novel and most impressive of these massive seasons. I will say though, as far as straight set wins are concerned, I do think this was on the competitive side of straight set wins, in my opinion, particularly just because the second set was really up in the air, and it looked like some physical questions were not long-term questions, but some short-term physical questions were coming into play. And obviously Medvedev had the set point. So I thought, while it was ultimately straightforward, as in the context of straight set matches, I thought it was pretty competitive.
Well, when you have a second set that's 1 hour and 45 minutes long, and the younger opponent has a set point, and you see Novak more than once physically wavering, whatever he was doing, I agree. And I think I wondered at certain points, who was it more important to win that second set for, Novak or Medvedev?
I think Novak would have won either way.
Yeah.
I kind of maybe texted that to you guys, that effect. And what happened on that set point that Medvedev had? Novak came into the net and he ended up winning the point. And that to me is a microcosm of the match in general and why it was so straightforward. And he's an all-court player. He can beat you any number of ways, both big picture and within points. He can beat you any number of ways, while Medvedev is an excellent baseliner who can beat you one way, basically.
Yeah, it looked to me like at some point that Medvedev was thinking, all right, I'll just last here 6 hours. I'll break down his legs. Gil,
Well,
you were going to say.
that was the plan. I have no, and there were some nuances and some intricacies to it. I think the plan for Daniil, and it started to come into play only in the second set, but it was get him tired, keep the ball on his backhand, where if he's very desperate to do point-ending damage, it's hard for him to do it against Medvedev. As great as the backhand is, it's just tough to finish from behind the baseline. So keep it on his backhand and then get the drop shot. Because when Novak needs to finish the point on his and the ball's on his backhand, that's kind of what he goes to, and cover it. So get him tired, play the backhand, cover the drop shot. That was like the 3-step plan to win. And from the baseline, it worked. It worked in the second set. He lost because he couldn't defend against the serve and volley. And Novak had the point shortening skills to overcome a stretch of time where he was losing from the back of the court. And he still won the set. So I'm with you, Amy, on the volleys. I don't think Novak has ever won another major final in his career where the volleys were so significant.
37 of 44 at the net. And again, we saw this in Australia with Medvedev versus Nadal, the limitations of his game and the forward part of the court. I'm not saying he should have come into net 50 times, but look how Roger and Novak and Rafa all made themselves better players in certain ways. And Medvedev, in a way, his strategy was more of the same that I've done for a while. And that's good. Instead of like, okay, Medvedev, play some doubles, do something, just some ways to improve that forward part of the court, because you saw several points where you could literally see Medvedev backing up, which is very rare for pro players, but you saw him backing up at times intentionally. And yeah, I guess he figured if I can break him down and win that second set, then I continue to break down his legs.
I don't know that what stood out. This wasn't a match as me and Nadal. The final in the Australian Open that Medvedev lost to Nadal in 5 sets. That was a match where I felt, if you had volleys, you probably would have won that match. But this wasn't one of those. This was where I'm more key in on the return and think, wow, you just have no answer for serve and volley on the deuce side. You hit a slice serve out wide against Medvedev and come in, which Novak did in Paris-Bercy throughout the second and the third set in that match over and over and over again successfully. And here we are 2 years later. There's no answer to it. It's like it's close to an automatic point. And it's really hard, I think, if you're Medvedev, to just accept that there's going to be a tactic that's going to work every time against you. And you're still trying to win majors with that being the case.
Well, right. And the quality of the execution mattered. And of course, then Medvedev, does he alter his return position? Does he try to redirect his returns? Because wide, and then he's going, he's opening the court. It's a right-handed version of the lefty playing the ad court, right? He's just going wide out to him. And then here it comes. I'm going to volley into the open court. And Medvedev is standing so far back to return. John McEnroe did that against Bjorn Borg. So I agree with you too, that volleying mattered. Medvedev's limitations hurt him more in the Australian Open final than this final. This was more, as Amy said, a showcase of Novak's volley skills.
Yeah, I haven't seen the full match report on the serve and volley yet, but you said, or he came in 44 times and he won like 84%.
37, yeah.
So, if you think that you win, around 50% from the baseline, most players win, it could be a little more, a little less, versus the 84%. It's just stunning. I mean, it's just stunning. And we can argue and parse that out about, will you come in when you know that, you've got an advantage or whatever. But when the percentages are that stark, 50-some% versus 84%. It's just a tactic that worked in this match and worked really well, especially when you're a quality volleyer like Novak is and has become, and you can do something with those volleys. You're not just like, oh, I made a volley and I put it deep, or you can 1-2 combo it or what have you. So just, a brilliant strategy executed to perfection.
Well, and coming to net doesn't win you just coming to net has so many things. First, it can win you points. Second of all, okay, the 7 he lost, Medvedev had to do something. I mean, when I come to net, even if I lose the points, I give myself like a half-cent tuition tax credit, for having put the time to it. And then it makes the whole baseline rally, it adds a threat from the baseline. I need to keep the ball deep or you'll also come in. And again, not that Novak was the second coming of Patrick Rafter in this match, but it just does all these things. It alters, like Gill pointed out, about the return, how you go about returning, because now the net's a factor, many things.
One of Medvedev's calling cards is he barely misses returns, even first serve returns. He puts them back in play. It's a hallmark of what he does well, but it seems like on serve and volley points, he's missing tons of returns because he just knows he needs to hit it great, and he's in an awful court position and he's missing tons of returns. So it's exactly what you said. It looks like a return miss, but it's caused by the forward pressure.
Definitely not an unforced error when he misses something like that. He is definitely kind of being pressed because now the net's in play. I mean, if you know the guy is never serving and volleying, you should never miss a return. Certainly never miss a return into the net.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you got all this air, but once the guy starts coming to net, you got to get the return down more and all this other stuff and the width of the court and all these things, and it kind of it presses on you.
And then just on Medvedev's side of the ball, when he was serving, on the surface, it seems like he had a decent serving night. But I saw that his winning percentage on second serve was only 38%. So he played 37 points on his second serve, and he only won 14 of those. So Novak returned his second serve just amazingly.
It's been a vulnerable part of Daniil's game. I mean, 10 double faults against Alcaraz. A lot of them came at times where he ended up winning the games anyway, so it didn't cost him. But I think it's definitely a plan also right now to stand really close and rush Daniil off the second serve, make him feel the pressure. He's throwing in double faults. But Alcaraz early on in the semifinal, he was missing a lot of those attacking second serve returns. And I just think it's an area where Novak, when he's trying to take the ball really, really early, he tends to do it, especially on the return, he tends to do it better than Carlos. So Medvedev double faulted 10 times against Alcaraz and still won half his second serve points.
Well,
and he double faulted 6 times in this match, I believe, and won 38% of his second serve points.
Yeah.
Well, I think the philosophy of the second serve return is very different for Novak than Carlos. I think Alcaraz he's calibrating, he's working, but he's trying to get a lot of yardage on that second serve return line. He wants to, and I think Novak wants to hit a properly good deep ball. It's a little bit more transitional. And I think, Alcaraz likes to, I don't see more. It's just his concept of what his second serve return is a dynamic, it's very dynamic. It's Novak's is too, but it's a different kind of way. It's more nuanced. It's like, it's going to be deep. It's going to be hard. It's going to be well placed. But it's going to be, it's rarely meant to be a winner or set up an approach, or he's not going to come to net on it.
Right. Yeah. Usually it's just deep middle, a little bit, you get kind of rushed on it. And then Novak on the fourth shot of the rally usually gets to take a pretty nice cut at the ball as a result.
Well, he just smothers you. You just don't feel, I think if a guy like Novak returns deep middle off of his ball, okay, now where do I go? You're already feeling this kind of pressure.
Novak also sliced his backhand a ton, and he mixed up his speeds a lot from the baseline, at least much better than Alcaraz, who was kind of playing fast, hitting the ball hard at Medvedev. And with Novak, there was a really good mix, and he keeps the ball lower naturally. So Medvedev was also more erratic from the baseline. I also thought that was, and I was thinking to myself, okay, why was it a little bit different here? Why isn't Medvedev striking the ball as cleanly when he's trying to be offensive from the baseline? And I think it had a lot to do with Novak playing a lot of slower balls and keeping the ball lower. That was my read on kind of Daniil, especially in the first set, just missing a little bit more than we've seen him throughout the tournament.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, look, that court, it's indoor, kind of I've told several sources, tell me it's fairly slow. It must have been like a sauna in there at times, and the points just going on. I think Novak's like, okay, you want to do it this way? All right, I'm Novak. And what have you got? And my forehand's better than yours, by the way. Your backhand's pretty good too, but my backhand, it's like, it's a little bit, I wasn't sure who was the cat and who was the mouse at times, because you'd see Medvedev would hit these shots sometimes, occasionally lash out a forehand, but then he'd hardly take advantage of it, and Novak would kind of reset.
Right. It's funny, during the tournament, I saw Medvedev up high. I had a seat like way up high where I could almost see over. And then I saw him down low in a different match. And the thing that struck me, two things struck me. He does not take advantage when he could be inside the court and he's got the other guy damaged. He just is content to recover back, you know, and it's really frustrating when you see that from that aspect. And then down low, I think what struck me is just the backhand, how amazing it is. But there was one backhand to backhand rally with Novak in particular where Novak got the best of him, and it was like, I think Medvedev just shook his head afterwards. It was like, okay, he got me.
That was in the second set tiebreak, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that rally was an example. It was almost, and it was a big point. Daniil was just giving him the same ball once, twice, a third time, a fourth time, and Novak just kept hitting it bigger and bigger and bigger on his cross-court backhand. It was that was a pretty funny point. Djokovic wins another tiebreak in this match, as I just alluded to. He's 4-1 in major final tiebreaks this year. Should we talk about the set point in the second set real quick, because it was pretty significant. I think that's one of those things where if you've never played, it can be difficult to understand what that moment is like. Basically, it looks like, if you take a screenshot or something, like Daniil played the dumbest shot of all time, because down the line was wide open, and if he went down the line, it would have been a passing shot. But what really happened there was Novak got into a 50-50 guess one way or the other situation, and he guessed cross, and guessing cross looked like, well, not recovering towards the line and just staying where he was. So instead of moving to his right, which Daniil anticipated he would, like, Medvedev's intention was to hit a cross-court pass behind Djokovic, but Djokovic just stood there, so there was no behind to be had. People were kind of hating on Medvedev a little bit for the shot. I think it's good anticipation. It happens. Like, it's a 50-50 play. Do you guys see the point like that, or do you think Medvedev made a real mistake?
Great. And Gill, since you also have a two-handed backhand, and if you might see you'd see that visually a little different than a lefty like me or a one-hander like Amy. Not that we're them. I'm not saying that, but yeah, I kind of see what you mean. It's kind of like a double psych out. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, yeah, I'm thinking this, he's thinking that, I'm going there. He knows me, I know him. So it's kind of like, yeah. And then of course you look in retrospect, you want to say, just hit the shot that's right there. But it's not easy. It's not so easy. On the other hand, if Novak goes where he's supposed to go, which is to cover the line, Medvedev whips across court and he looks like a genius, doesn't he? So, and the cross-court passing shots have a lot going for them. So it's also, and it's so fast. So fast.
I thought that's really good analysis. It's kind of the game within the game. And I do have that happen to me when I'm playing somebody that I've played many, many, many times before. And I know her tendencies and I know she's going to go down the line here. So then I start to think to myself, let's get ahead of her. But I also thought that, McEnroe was saying on the telecast, why didn't he just go down the line? I thought that the position that Daniil was in was a little more defensive than people realize, and defense goes cross if you have a choice. So just to make it seem like, oh, he should just go down the line, it's that easy. It's not that easy.
He wasn't, and that was your point, he wasn't quite as in control. He didn't quite have the passing shot option that we like to think. It's not like here it sat and he had the option. He was ready to line it up. He was kind of in the move. And see, again, though, all of this points to Medvedev's lack of comfort, be it as a volleyer or as a passing shot guy, or as an anything guy in the front part of the court. You know, if you look to those neighborhoods, like to him, that's like like the way he deals, the way he even handles drop shots. He's fast enough to run them down, but he doesn't always know quite what to do with them. The way Novak has become quite expert. I'll shove this one down the line. Novak likes to hit his forehand cross court when he runs in for a drop, or just to cover and move and maintain his balance and position. I just see so many times Medvedev is this, you know, he's a long-standing defender. He's won a lot of matches playing what he sees as kind of defense. That's how he beats his Rublevs. You know, Alcaraz is a little different.
Yeah. I mean, he dominated Alcaraz by serving much better, and he was more consistent from the back of the court. I thought, you know, there was some serve and volley failure for Alcaraz in the fourth set, a little bit, and he needed that little bit, and he got the break of serve. But there wasn't a whole lot of serve and volley failure from Alcaraz. It was mostly very successful, and it wasn't the reason Alcaraz lost the match. Let's address kind of that semifinal, because it was looking like, just considering the way the last two Alcaraz-Medvedev meetings had gone, there was some kind of gearing up for round 3 at a major of Djokovic-Alcaraz, and it didn't happen.
No, Medvedev proved he's quite persistent and quite astute. He played that first set tiebreak really shook things. I mean, Alcaraz played 4 pretty strange points that he even admitted he kind of lost his way on, and then that kind of put something over on him, because then he rapidly lost the second set, and then from there Medvedev, I think, had a certain kind of comfort. He's in the match and he's serving well. That is one of the things. I mean, a defender like that with a big serve, that can be tricky. But I was very surprised by that outcome. I don't like making predictions, but I was surprised by that.
I hope that no one gets mad at me for saying I wish Alcaraz had won that match, because I think the final would have been much more entertaining. I think your analysis skill is good, that it was a lot of one note kind of power from Alcaraz, and in terms of what he was doing from the baseline, as opposed to what Novak did, which was more variation. And Daniil said after the match that he was in the zone. And that was kind of, I mean, anyone who's ever played any sport, not just tennis, has probably had that feeling before, where you're not even thinking. It's just everything's coming easy. You're playing very free. And then I thought, well, that's not good if Daniil has identified himself as being in the zone in that match, because you cannot, it's elusive. It's like trying to hold water. You cannot predetermine being in the zone. So if he was in the zone for that match, he probably wasn't going to be for the final.
That's actually interesting, because he was also saying that I played a 12 out of 10 level. And then he said against Novak, I need to play a 15 out of 10. So, you know, it's just words, but
that's why I like writing about sports. You know,
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, someone said to me, well, Roger said this. Yeah, he said it. And that's the thing. That's why I try not to cover sports like politics or politics like sports. You know, politics gets concerned with these polls, which are like scores. I was like, in politics, they play the score. The poll says this, the opinion polls, and it's all words upon words. The great thing about sports is, yeah, they say all sort of, you got to play a 12 out of a 10, 15 out of 10. I mean, Medvedev is very facile, and it makes him kind of funny and engaging, but it doesn't, it confers little meaning.
he's one of my, yeah. Well, in the words department, Daniil is unmatched. One of the best interviews, if not the best interview, in my opinion. What about the other semifinal? Let's talk Djokovic-Shelton. Straight setter, Joel. Ben, with a very surprising run, considering he hadn't won back-to-back matches since the Australian Open. And then it was, okay, here's your ultimate test here, thrown into the fire. How do you think Ben fared, and where do you think Novak found advantages?
I think in the first 2 sets, I was a little surprised that Shelton was kind of tight and sluggish. I thought he would know, you know, the pre-Shelton thinking would be, hey, this like Alcaraz in that Wimbledon final. This is the greatest day of my life. I'm 20 years old. I'm at 21, however old, I forget how old Ben is. In the semis of the US Open, got nothing to lose, throw in, give it my go. But I thought he was kind of little sloppy and off. And I think Novak just kind of, okay, young man, I can take your measure. You're not even there yet. I remember I have played Carlos. He's the head of your freshman cohort group. You know, you're okay. And then the third set, things got a little interesting, but I thought Ben, it was still kind of like up and down. You know, it's like learning how to drive or something. Easy, steady. And I think Novak just knew, okay, all right, okay. And Shelton, I think he was a little sluggish and tight on the movement front.
Well, that's who Ben is at this point. Up and down, up and down, up and down. Spectacular, awful, spectacular, awful. Which is okay. I mean, it's been very entertaining. And obviously, I mean, you look at the Tiafoe third set tiebreak, for example, with Shelton. He double faulted back to back and then hit the best return of the tournament. And that kind of is him in a nutshell.
Yeah. And so I think against Novak, you just can't. There's no real margin for that kind of stuff. You know, but I love Ben Shelton, and I think it's like a little bit like Alcaraz, Holger Rune. I mean, these guys bring a lot of excitement, and they're trying to answer the questions that have been posed by the big three about how am I going to build points here? I mean, look at the way Shelton plays. He can serve, he can volley, he ground strokes, but yeah, it's a work in progress. But semis the Open, pretty good.
Yeah, and certainly it was a sharp contrast to Novak, whose return I thought stood out. Ben, I think, had some serving issues with spots and variation and maybe even a shoulder issue that was preventing him from really bringing the 130 every time. But ultimately, Novak's return completely swallowed him up. There was some bad blood going on. You know, Shelton is a different kind of character with the way he carries himself on court. It's very typical, like what you'll see in college tennis. Everybody's doing it in college tennis, and usually in the pros you don't do it. But Ben is still, you know, being that way. Very energetic, celebrations, and then I guess Novak probably didn't appreciate it because he took the hang up the phone celebration. The handshake was icy, which is very rare for Novak. Amy, what did you make of the tension in that match?
Well, first of all, we don't hang up phones like that anymore. We touch a button on our phone. Somebody pulled up a video of Fabio Fognini now really putting the hang up down. And it's like, when's the last time someone hung up a phone?
Expect your answer.
So when I first saw it, my reaction was, I don't like that, just because Shelton is only 20 years old and Novak is 36, and Shelton is closer in age to Novak's son Stefan than Shelton is to Novak. So it's almost like, come on, Novak, be more like a dad, teach this young man. But then I discussed it with my son, who's 13, and my son loved what Novak did. And he explained why, and it just kind of made me think, like, of all the, I don't know why, but all the NBA guys that I've loved over the years, like Jordan and Magic Johnson and Dikembe Mutombo and some of the stuff that he's done. And it's like, Amy, why would you love it in the NBA but not like it here? And then I listened to Ben Shelton's answer, and he was fine with it. So I guess after talking to my son and really thinking about it, I actually lightened up and thought it was funny.
Hasn't your son liked Novak for a while?
He likes Novak. His favorite player is Casper Ruud. I don't know.
Oh, hey, look, but I think when you're, you build affinities with different people at different times. That's why I asked if your son liked Novak, because maybe he'd built a affinity for the experienced player over. He might, even though your son's 13, he might see Shelton as a punk, as a young guy. Who's this young kid coming along thinking he can act that way towards the great Novak? Yeah, it was a little strange. It was a little strange because I would have thought Novak would have given him a little bit more like, all right, welcome to the big leagues. You're semi. You're a nice player. Maybe we'll practice next time you're in Monte Carlo.
Yeah, I
mean,
what
did you think, Gill?
The only thing so first of all, I was caught off guard because I've watched Ben Shelton all year long, And this is just what he does, like every match. There's no disrespect to Novak. There's no disrespect to France. He loves Francis. They're like really, they're pals. It's just what he does. So I was just really caught off guard by Novak being upset with it, because I didn't think Novak would care about it at all. That said, considering Novak, it did rub him the wrong way. In that case, yeah, he should absolutely do what he did and give the celebration right back. I mean, it's funny because I think the way to respond, at least for me, if somebody who I'm playing is celebrating and yelling every point, and I've seen this happen in pro matches as well, the response is just to do it back, right? Like that's how I think that's a healthy way to compartmentalize it. Like, oh, you're going to come on after every point? I'll do it too. How you like that?
That's one approach. It doesn't have to be approach. It's
no, that's one approach. You're right. It's not the approach, but it's one approach. And that would be my approach. So I think Novak was like, you're going to do it? I'm going to do it.
Another approach is the Michelle Obama approach, which is they go low, you go high, and I don't know, part of me, because Novak is, the all-time champ.
Yeah.
Part of me was like expecting him to do that, but that's not really fair because that's not necessarily his personality. And then mixed with all this, the discussions where my son, who's a very good boy, loved Novak's deal. Mixed with all this was some old clips of Roger Federer, like, circa 2009, some post-match interviews where he said some very unsporting things, like sour grapes, and it's like, okay, don't forget that these people are human beings, and don't expect perfection, and don't project certain saintly things onto these athletes, because that's not fair.
And so they will act in certain kind of ways because they're athletes and they're doing their thing. And Shelton isn't meant to stay. Shelton's not thinking I'm showing him up. Shelton's just thinking I'm extending my life from college tennis into the big leagues. I'm seamlessly have on-court coaching. Shelton has probably one of the narrowest gaps in a player's career between coaching in college and now coaching in the pros. So it's all one big dual match for him now. So yeah, it's interesting. I suspect it won't mean anything the next time they play.
I liked that it got people talking, in this sport. I mean, and we have a talk show, so we know a lot of the things we talk about is very, very technical, and we love that, but it's not a mainstream conversation that we get to have here. But I think Shelton hanging up the phone, Djokovic hanging up the phone, like that's kind of a mainstream conversation. It's very rare in the sport that these kinds of discussions kind of penetrate, and like my group chat that I have with my friends might be like, whoa, like, did you see that? That's very rare. So I appreciated that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's going to be different than our talk about pronating after the Vienna semis, right? We're
Right.
about pronating and footwork. Well, look, these are the majors, and these are times of the year when tennis has its chance to kind of cross over into broader consciousness, more so in America from the US Open. Wimbledon is its own thing to England, and even in America, we maintain a respect to some degree where, okay, it's our slam, it's New York, it's the New York Post, it's page 6, it's a New York tabloid guy, right? Noticing that it's hitting a talk show, it's that kind of stuff. That's right, for what it's worth.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Joel, first, because I want to avoid kind of going forward and talking about what's next for Novak. We'll do it on another show. But in terms of the first week of the US Open, was there something, just because we weren't doing shows, I want to go back here, was there something that was very memorable for you, or something that you covered that kind of sticks out? And it could be Novak related, but I also suppose it doesn't have to be. Anything that happened in the first week?
Well, when Novak went down 2-0, I remember thinking, well, okay, so he's got a 40% chance to lose. I mean, in other words,
yeah,
Novak down 2-0 is like, all right, particularly against someone who isn't that big a server. It's kind of like, okay, all right, we're going to be fine here. It's going to take a while, but he's just going to toothpick by toothpick. But I was more engaged sometimes by some of the women's matches than the men's matches in the first week.
I was really struck by the Coco Gauff Laura Siegemund match, which was a first round match for Coco Gauff. And now when I look back on Gauff's run, which was so eventful, everything that happened, including like the protester who glued his feet to the cement and all that. But when you go back to that first round match, how Laura, who qualified very valiantly for this tournament, was really slow playing and getting away with it. And Coco went to the chair umpire and said, look, this is not right. You know, she said something to the effect, I rarely protest like this, but I have to say something here. And then how she handled that, she dropped a set, but she won the match. That to me was incredibly memorable. And then everything that happened after for her. I'll never forget this tournament for Coco Gauff.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, yesterday after it was one of the more emotional major title moments that I can remember. I think family was so close. I think we've seen Coco kind of grow up as a teenager a little bit more so than some of these others who don't really grow up in the spotlight quite as much. So yeah, that was awesome. I think back like, okay, what was a 5-setter that we had a little bit like later on in the tournament that was very memorable? And I guess Medvedev Sinner, I've never ever seen a match where both players are struggling physically for so long at the same time. And like they're playing a tennis match, and it's like from the second set forward, like for 3 hours they were out there just suffering. And it ended up going 5. It was I mean Zverev Sinner. I don't know what I ended up saying, but yeah, that Zverev Sinner match was a very unique match. I wouldn't call it a classic quality wise, but it was one of a kind in the sense that it was just played in a swamp and both players were basically dead as a result.
It was a mini redemptive effort for Zverev because, it's like that shows that this year he's recovered nicely from from the injury last year. Semis of Roland Garros, quarters here, a win over Sinner, who's younger than him, to kind of say, hey, I'm still a guy. But yeah, that was almost more like a clay court match on a hard court. I mean, those guys were just totally grinding through it. And I think it was more an open of sensations and significance more than a lot of spectacular tennis. Last year, there's some spectacular tennis, a number of the Tiafoe matches, some of the Alcaraz matches. This year, I think it was more just the significance of both winners who emerged. Novak, more pages, more history, 24 slams. Coco, her first. That was more what this Open was about the significance of these title winners.
And the event every year I'm back just feels bigger and more crowded, which has its positives and negatives. But, the energy remains so high and they continue to kind of raise the bar. So, I mean, I don't mean to shill for my home tournament, my favorite tournament, but, it is the truth. I'm not just saying that. So that was wonderful. Novak Djokovic wins his 24th major. And now we have what should be a pretty interesting fall season ahead of us. Always some unpredictability involved. And we'll have a race to number one. I mean, it's close between Alcaraz and Djokovic. I'm sure we'll talk about that in the near future. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. We appreciate it if you leave a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.